versus ours.
I think of all the issues, nuclear is the one that's really closest to my heart because it's just absolutely about life and death. The pollution from these power stations, it just kills people, even the routine emission.
6,500 miles away in Fukushima 3 years ago, we remember three massively tragic events. First of all, the earthquake that led to the massive tsunami. That tsunami then led, as you know, to the tragedy for which we are here today.
Which was back in the 1980s, felt there was something going on over there. They felt that round here in Lydney there were clusters of leukemia which were unacceptable. And SCAR went over to Berkeley and they measured the radiation coming out of that place at the perimeter, and they found that was the highest level of radiation anywhere in the country. And they used that to bring people together. There was a big meeting up in Gloucester Cathedral, a meeting which happens every year, campaigners coming together, sharing knowledge and saying this is dangerous, this is not what we want.
If the truth were known about the consequences of nuclear power, it would have been shut down years ago. And that's why we have to, these lies have to be maintained, and this is what we have to challenge, because radiation is that damaging. We cannot allow it to be built here in our beautiful countryside. Japan itself closed down their nuclear power stations, but in this country that public debate wasn't had, and that's something else we absolutely need to make sure happens. That's one of our most important jobs, to make sure that we have that debate about the dangers and the risks of nuclear power.
And that place which they want to build down there with a cooling tower, which is going to be dominating like you would not believe, is going to be under sea level. And you get a storm surge, it's a Fukushima all over again. This is what is so really extraordinary that people can even be considering it.
I've got to speak about lots of different things at the moment as a European candidate, from neonicotinoid pesticides and why they kill bees, right across to what we should do about the Ukraine. But this issue here today is one that's really close to my heart. Some of you probably know that before I became an economist about 15 years ago, I did a lot of work into nuclear power, nuclear radiation, and particularly the health effects of the nuclear industry. That took up about 10 years of my life. And the reason I had to stop it was just that it was too bloody depressing, to be honest with you. You know, 10 years of my life I spent thinking about that, and I moved on to becoming an economist, which was more cheerful. That tells you how bad it was. But I think it's absolutely crucial that we think about the economics here, because what's going on when they build these power stations, it's not about energy, it's not about filling the energy gap. It's about some people making a huge amount of money and us taking the cost of that.
Even the Japanese Prime Minister at the time, said, I'd like to quote his words, he said, no other accident or disaster that would affect 50 million people could do this sort of harm. Maybe a war, but there is no other accident that can cause such a tragedy.
You only need to be attacked by one atom of radioactive material, and that can start a mutation which can lead to cancer. So if you were coming up with something that would destroy human life, it might be nuclear radiation, and for that reason it's far too dangerous for us to think we can control it and contain it. Now, you very often hear people saying, it's about the risks of catastrophic failure of a plant, which is what we're remembering here that happened in Fukushima 3 years ago. But that's slightly to miss the point, because the power stations we've had along this river over the past 30, 40 years have been putting out that sort of dangerous, polluting radiation all that time on a routine basis, and cancers have been caused as a result of that. It's not about the power, it's about the money. It's also, I believe, about bringing Chinese finance into this country and encouraging the Chinese to do their finance activities through London rather than through Frankfurt.
But this is about the people at Fukushima. There were about 1/3 evacuees. There'll be a lot more here. I mean, you know, there's got Bristol just over there. You've got Cheltenham, Gloucester, Cardiff, Swansea. You know, it's a lot of people that's going to have to, Stroud of course, would have to move. About 100,000 of those are still permanently evacuated, and you hear stories of, and this is where you get down to the individual, of small villages, communities 1,600 strong, and they've been lifted. In total, the whole community has been lifted and have been put into an empty gymnasium in Tokyo, into temporary accommodation, temporary 3 years down the line. They're still there. And that the damage that has been done to the residents in Fukushima and around in that region is not just the thyroid cancer, but is the terrible mental toll. Suicide levels have absolutely rocketed. Health is very, very poor indeed because of the stress that many people have been put under through being forced out of their own homes. The International Commission on Radiological Protection ran their numbers. Already there are 700% more cases of thyroid cancer in 3 years than they're expecting over the entire lifetime of the 178,000 people who were irradiated.
They were, because there are so many lies that come out of the nuclear industry about the health consequences, and their model for deciding what the health consequences are is hopelessly out of date. It actually predates the discovery of DNA. So we do not have the true facts about how many people have died and will die if we allow this nuclear development to be made at this site.
So it's 50 kilometres away. There's a town which is called Koriyama. And in that town, all the children in that town are not allowed to play outside for longer than 15 minutes in the day.
There is actually quite a good chance that it will not go ahead, I believe, Hinckley and Albury, because it cannot happen without huge public subsidy. And that subsidy is not legal. The European Commission checks out all public subsidy to these sorts of industries, and under what's called state aid rules, they have to say whether that can go ahead. So although the whole media story was Hinckley's a done deal, that is not the case. We can still stop it, and the European Commission can stop it. And Green MEP Jean Lambert has already raised a question with them, and it's been submitted to the European Commission to consider, is that a reasonable level of subsidy? And it's not. They can't build new nuclear power without a huge amount of subsidy because it's so expensive, it's not efficient, even if we don't think about disposing of the waste. So there's a good chance that the European Commission can stop these new nuclear developments. We have to keep the pressure on to make that happen and not let them get away with breaking their promise and putting huge public subsidy into it. We are strong, we can stand strong, we can defeat this rebirth of this hideous industry that none of us want and that we don't need. We can have clean, safe, renewable energy instead. Thank you very much.
Parry, it was very sad not to be able to attend today, but he did send a message, which is: the case for nuclear power is as weak today as it has ever been. But politicians are easily fooled by the industry's hype and lies, which means that we all have to keep on campaigning until such time as the threat of future nuclear developments at Albury and elsewhere have finally been lifted. So thank you to John.
Friends, we stand together, regardless of our political views, to contemplate and meditate and consider those that we've never met. Consider those families who will never see the people that they've loved and grown up with again. 250 people were killed, 20,000 people are still missing. And that, to me, is not worth the price to be paid.
We're going to now walk down, process down to Lydney docks with flowers. If you haven't written your letter to the people of Fukushima, please do put it in the bag. Great turnout today. We've had well over 100 people turn up, which is fantastic. A bitterly cold day as ever on the 11th of March. Last year we were up outside the Horizon offices in Gloucester, and it was -8 and blowing a gale, so it's always going to be cold, but we're always going to be here year in, year out on the 11th of March. I think you should